Bob has some props that are on their way.
Okay. Bob will explain himself.
Oh, sure. Bob's going to introduce himself. Well, how do you do? My name is Bob Blumer. I've had the good fortune of creating and hosting 3 shows on the Food Network. I've written a few cookbooks, broken 7 food-related Guinness World Records, yet still somehow a disappointment to my mother.
You've appeared at IdeaCity a couple times.
I have appeared at IdeaCity, thanks to Moses,
and
twice.
your mom appreciates that. I know,
Well,
she told me so.
She told you so. That would be pretty difficult, but I'll explain that later. All right, well, before I start, I do have a small confession to make, and I'd appreciate it if you keep it within this room. You know, it's very true what they say behind my back about my cooking. It's garbage. I mean, it's just garbage. We'll get to that in a minute. But first, after my minions have finished setting this up, I'd like to start with a few top-line facts about food waste. And I'm sure you've all heard these before, and I'm sure if you're like me, you're even kind of numbed to them. But let's just recap these quickly. Hunger and food insecurity is not about a lack of food. The world produces more than enough food to nourish every human being on the planet. So why are people still hungry? Well, more than 1/3 of all the food produced each year is spoiled or squandered at various points along the food chain. And what happens with all this garbage? The wasted food clogs up landfills, drains all sorts of natural resources that are required to produce and transport it, and creates huge amounts of greenhouse gases. So, that's the problem. What can people like you and me do to have an impact, to make real change? Well, first of all, 25% of all the food that is produced by farmers, grown by farmers, is plowed under or thrown out before it ever gets to market. That's because it's considered to be aesthetically imperfect, though as we all know, it's perfectly good to eat. So who here in this room is willing to meet me next Friday morning at Queen's Park to lobby our politicians to see if they'll mandate that every single grocery store in this country dedicates at least one section of their produce section to the so-called ugly fruits and vegetables? Well, I count about lots of applause, but I see about 6 hands who are willing to join me at Queen's Park. I think one of them might be my father-in-law, so we're down to 5. Okay, here's another problem. The use-by and sell-by dates that manufacturers use on all sorts of food products are incredibly confusing, and they cost consumers a lot of money because they end up throwing out all sorts of good food that they think is bad. So who here will dedicate a week of their life to join me and write a white paper that will help change the standards and practices of how our food is labeled? Moses, this is a tough crowd. Okay, I got one more for you. Consumers, so people just like me and you, throw out twice as much good food as all the food manufacturers and retailers combined. That's a lot of good food that's being thrown into the garbage. So, one more time, hands up. Who here in this room is willing to dedicate 1 or 2 minutes a day, not at Queen's Park, not in an office building, but in the comfort of your own kitchen, just working to reduce the amount of good food that you throw in the garbage? Ah, that's more like it. Excellent. Well, what I would like to do is show you how you can rescue all sorts of good food from your own kitchen. And here's how we're going to start. These are the contents of a typical kitchen trash. Maybe garbage to you, but to me, I see a world of possibility. So let's see what we can do here. First of all, this cauliflower, clearly it's been thrown out because it's starting to blacken. But there's all sorts of great vitamins and minerals, nutrients left in this. All you need to do is take off the bad part. I'm going to chop this up a little bit and toss it in our food processor. By the way, here's our mission. You know the term garbage pizza? You familiar with that? It's an old school term, and it describes a pizza that has everything on it but the kitchen sink. And so today what we're going to do is we're actually going to use all this garbage, and we're going to make a different kind of garbage pizza. So, cauliflower is going into the food processor. Now, if I just buzz this a couple times in the food processor, I could add this cauliflower to some rice, serve it to my kids, if I had any, and trick them into eating vegetables they didn't even know they were eating. Now look at this. This potato, obviously thrown out because it's starting to spud, but it's still good. If it's not green, it's still good. So we're going to rough chop it and add it to the food processor. We're starting with our crust for our pizza. So, give this a little bit of a whirl. Don't do this at home, you'll void the warranty. Now, we're making a crust. We don't want too much moisture in our crust. Maybe if you came over to this side, maybe over here, if you don't mind, that would be great. So, and that's a good spot for you to live. So we want to wring out some of the extra moisture. It's really simple. But of course, you don't want to throw that out because you're trying to rescue food, not waste it. So that's potatoes and cauliflower with some nice starch in it. You could add that to some risotto. You could add it to a vegetable stock. Plenty of things to do with it. So why would anybody throw out good eggs? Look at that. We're a week past the use-by date. But you know what? Eggs are usually good for about a month after the use-by date. There's a super simple test. You put it in some water. If it stands straight up or floats on its side, it's perfectly good. If it's on its side but on the bottom, it's perfectly good. If it floats to the top, that's when you know it's really rotten. Clearly, these eggs are both perfectly good. Now, look at that. Empty bag of flour. But is it? There's always a little bit of flour left in a flour bag. What else do we need? Well, let's take a little bit of this cheese. It's been thrown out because clearly it's starting to harden there. But there's still some life left in it. So we'll take a bit of this cheese, add this in, and now we're going to mix it all up. And this is going to provide us with our crust. If you have any friends who are gluten-free, this is a great crust to make them for your pizza. Just leave out the flour. You could add a little bit of cornmeal if you wanted. Now, set this down. What else have I got here? I need to grease my my sheet pan here. A little bit of dregs of some butter. So, pat this down. Put it in a 450-degree oven for about 15 minutes. And in the middle of it, you can either flip it over or just simply turn on the broiler at the end. Okay. Now, we need some toppings. Toppings for our pizza. What do we got here? Well, there's some asparagus stalks. You know, I'm as guilty as every chef and cookbook author in telling people that you take your asparagus, you bend it, and you take the top part and you throw out the rest of it. But the truth is, this part of the asparagus is perfectly fine. And if you just slice it into small little rings like this, it'll keep it as tender as you need it to be. You don't even need to peel it with a vegetable peeler, but you're welcome to do that if you want. I need some oil for my pan. Look at this. Artichoke halves. Somebody has taken all the grilled artichoke halves out of this jar, but left the oil in that it's packed in. That's just very wasteful. Okay, so we've rescued that. I've got my asparagus. We've all done this, haven't we? And you know what? You're not going to save the world by rescuing this one little bit of red bell pepper, but how you do the little things is how you do everything. And that's just a good mantra to have. I didn't write it. Someone else much smarter than I did. But as you can see, we can add just a nice little bit of color, a little bit of sweetness. What else have we got here? Look at that. Swiss chard stems. I used to throw them out until I discovered they're really tasty. That's another thing. If you just slice these in small bits like this, you can put this in minestrone soup. You could put it in salads. It's fantastic. And really, I'm still getting the flavor there. Something else that, again, I'm guilty of when I write recipes, take your leek. What does this recipe always say? Use the bottom third, the white part, but the rest of it still got a lot of flavor. And if you just slice it like that, maybe take off the couple of outside bits, there is tons of great mild onion flavor in here. What else can we find? Mushroom stems. Same thing, mushroom stems. These are great in omelets. You just saute them a bit, give them some nice brown, and then you can put them in all sorts of things. Oh, and lastly, here we go. The carcass of a rotisserie chicken. You know what? I have never met a rotisserie chicken carcass that I couldn't find at least 1/2 a cup of chicken on. And then when you've picked your carcass, picked every bit of meat off it, please, please, please don't throw it out. Put it in your freezer in a plastic bag, and when you get 3 or 4 of them, pull it out, find some tired carrots, onions, and celery in the bottom of your fridge, and make yourself a glorious stock. I mean, first of all, you're rescuing food, you're saving hard-earned cash dollars, and you're making a stock that's infinitely better than that chicken-flavored dishwater that the soup companies will sell you. All right. Now, we need a sauce. And I don't see any tomatoes up here. So let's see if we can make ourselves a pesto sauce. I don't see any beautiful basil either, but look, all sorts of greens here. Some celery tops. You could also use these in salads, in bean salads with quinoa. This is fennel. Fennel fronds, or fawns, actually will last in your fridge for a couple of weeks. They're great for garnishing. You can use them anywhere that you use fresh dill. I've even got some radish tops. They're not all great, but there's a few of them that are still good. Let's take these. Now, we need peanuts, right, for our pesto. Don't see any nuts or nuts of any kind. But look at that. There's some organic peanut butter made from nuts. There's always a little bit of peanut butter around the outside of that jar. So, save that. Look at this. That garlic head, that clove started to sprout. Clearly, that's why someone threw it out. But it's still just as good as it ever was. Maybe a little milder. The sprout itself is not going to hurt you, I promise you. Now, last 2 things, we need some olive oil, but we don't have any olive oil. Except that, we have sun-dried tomatoes packed in olive oil. Tomatoes themselves are gone, but this oil is perfectly good. You could also use that in salad dressings, to drizzle on bruschetta. In fact, it's even better than olive oil because it's got all sorts of flavor in it. Some Parmesan. There's a Parmesan rye. No Italian noni would throw that out. They put it in soups. They put it in some beans as they're cooking. So, there we go. And so let's just give this a quick whirl. Haha, easier said than done. Now, Moses, do you like pesto?
Me?
Do you like pesto?
What's pesto?
What's pesto? Moses, come on. You're killing me. It's a little more of that oil. Okay. So let's start by tasting a store-bought pesto, if you will.
Okay. Straight? Just
Yeah, just a little taste.
no.
What do you think of it?
Yeah.
It's all right.
What's in that?
Well, you know what? Store-bought pesto has most of the things that a homemade pesto would have, but it also has a lot more vinegar because they need to preserve it, right? You can taste that, can't you? Now, we've just made a garbage pesto. Taste that, if you will. Go for it. It's good. I promise. What do you think?
Better than that other stuff.
Damn, yes! Right out of the trash! All right. So, thank you.
May I retire?
Yes, you may. So, here's our crust. Got a good look at that? That's 15 minutes. Let's put down our pesto. Come on, that's looking good, isn't it? Our toppings. There we go. Now we need to rescue a little more cheese from here. Here's a bit of cheese with some mold on it, but if I just take that last moldy bit off, use some of this. And what else? Oh, people throw out all sorts of cheese. It's crazy. Here's a bit of a goat cheese. You can see there. You can see that it's a bit stale. You know, but this just got thrown in the garbage. Wouldn't see that happening at my house. So there we go. Now, back in the Easy Bake Oven. You know, if you've ever watched Cooking on the Food Network, you know that it's not much different from professional wrestling. You gotta go with it. So the crust was about 15 minutes in the oven, and now we're gonna cook this for about 5 more minutes, but not really because there's 39 seconds on the clock. But there is your pizza. Whoa, hot! Made entirely from ingredients you can rescue from your own refrigerator, from your counters, from everywhere else. So just remember this, with a little practice, a little determination, and a little commitment, someday your cooking too can be garbage. Thank you. Here we are. How was the pesto really?
It was okay, yeah.
Whoa!
Hey, no, that's a rave review.
Oh, okay.
We're Canadian,
You're
remember?
tough.
No. When a Canadian is enthusiastic,
It's okay.
he says it's okay. Or he says, not bad. But if he's really like over the top, Margaret Atwood says, if he's really over the top crazy, he says, not bad at all.
The ultimate compliment.
That was it, baby. Let's go get a photo.